Welcome back from the coffee break. So now we're here for the second part of today. And I think we have some very exciting flow of the discussion prepared. So we will start with Arko. Arko Vervark. He is joining us from the Netherlands. They have fantastic experience in working on sustainability in practice. He's the Global Vice President of Sales at Tangelo Software. Then we will follow with the CEO of ING Czechia Republika, Eva Bučová and Hugh Wheelan, one of our esteemed guests from abroad as well. And then we will have a discussion about trying to transform different businesses and industry and how does the insurance play a role in that. Since we are under time pressure and we don't want to really eat into the available time for the presentations, we will get started. So I have the pleasure to welcome Arko Vervark from Tangelo. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello. Yes, it's working. Thank you all, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here on stage and be able to contribute to the discussions and the conversations about sustainable finance reporting, but the emphasis on reporting. So, yeah, my talk today is about CSRD. No surprises there. But a little bit different. I'm not going to talk about the theory. I'm going to talk about what's been in practice going on. So what happened this last year? The first wave of companies that had to report under CSRD. So before I do that, I want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So why are we reporting, and why does it matter that we report for sustainability? If we look at reporting, and we need to be held accountable, of course, for what we're doing. And I think reporting turns the ambitions that we have into actionables, and it makes it transparent. So going from ambitions, and I think the Europeans have quite some big ambitions. We need to be also accountable for what we're doing. So otherwise, what does it mean, right? What we're doing. And if we look at CSRD, I think we have some fundaments, some pillars underneath it, the whole CSRD. And it is, well, the transparency, accessibility, and comparability. Transparency, we need to tell the whole story, and not only the good news. Accessibility, everyone should be able to observe and to get the information. Comparability is also a big pillar for CSRD. We need to be able to compare ourselves with our peers, with competitors, industry standards. So I think this is important. But so we now have entered into the CSRD first year, following up the previous statements, the previous standards that we had, but with much more rules, more companies that need to comply into the CSRD, much more details on all the data that we need to have in there, and also with the new standards, because the previous standard doesn't apply anymore. So we now have the ESRS standards, and they are mandatory for those who didn't know that. They're mandatory. As we all have, people from finance know where financial statements, they've been there for a long time in the integrated annual reports. The sustainable statements should also be in there. All right, so let's have a look at that first wave then, and a little bit on the timeline in there. So here's where we are right now. So we just came out of the first wave, and they published over the period of 2024. These were the big listed companies, the PIs, as we know them, and actually, these are the companies that were already doing it for some kind of way already. So why am I here? Well, Tangelo, we're a technology partner. So technology partner, we help clients all around the world and helping them to come up with their external corporate reports. So we have a platform where they can work in jointly and come up with these really nice designs, picture-perfect glossies. So we have around 50 plus clients here in Europe that came out of this first wave. They reported under CSRD. So what have we seen with these clients from this first wave? Well, one of the things is first reports, they varied in depth and approach. So yeah, there were all different kind of reports. Some clients were more ready than others. Some also interpreted data points differently than others, and I think that's not uncommon. You know, it's all new. It's the first time. So, and for example, if you look at the double materiality analysis, we can have up to 1,000 data points in there. It could be interpreted sometimes a little bit different. Not only on how we interpret it, also on the way we disclose it and how we communicate it. But I will come back to that a little bit later. What we saw with our clients, that there was a tremendous amount of more pages created on the CSRD. On average, I think around 50 to 70 extra pages, but up to 100 extra pages just because we have now CSRD in there. Many also took the phase-in option. And yeah, that's allowed on the CSRD. But what we saw is that for specific data points, they were sometimes deferred, also with general information. And yeah, this was not about cutting the edges, cutting the corners. It was just about being practical for the first year, learning and keep on going the process. So the sustainable statement, it's now central to the report. And I think that's important. You know, it's a structural shift what we have seen in the reports. It's not buried anywhere, somewhere in a chapter or in a section. You know, it's central. We have a lot of clients that put it really central in the reports, even before the financial statements. Some put it after the financial statements. But it is a prominent and indexed part of the reports in the integrated annual reports. We did see and hear back from our clients, you know, it's a lot of work, especially the first year. It's the heavy lifting in the first year. More pages, more people are involved, not only sustainability, of course finance also, it's investor relations, corporate communications, so many people are involved in there, so it's a lot. More data, as you think about it, you know, all the data points that we need to collect information about, we need to source that, we need to validate that, calculate that, we have a review process involved in there before we finally publish it. So it's a serious process and, well, a lot of work, but, well, I'll come back to that a little bit later. Making disclosures easier to read. Well, if you can still remember, I started off with one of the first slides on the pillars, the fundamentals on CSRD. It's about being transparent, accessibility, and comparability. I think I would like to add readability to that as well, because we have so much information that we need to disclose. The standards don't subscribe how you need to disclose it. It's just you have an obligation to put it in there. But it can be very different on how you communicate it to your stakeholders. Because we had clients that, well, they made many pages of content, big narratives about a specific subject. Other clients just, yeah, put in a picture, whereas a picture may say, well, more than 1,000 words. So that's something that we have been seeing. Yeah, well, for example, here we see such a picture. It's not about the content, but it's more like, okay, we can write 20 pages about this, but you can also work with visuals. And that has been becoming more and more effective in these reports. Not everyone, also some have made a combination of text and visuals, and I think that's the most optical one. But yeah. Another thing what's been going on is, hey, we try to make it easier for our clients, our stakeholders, to read this information, this communication. What we see over here, I hope you see it, is specific data points and pins that we put in the margin of the annual report. So it states at this section that we're reading what the data point is that is concerning. It helps the people read the information. And sometimes in combination or just around this, have the index in the annexes with all the data points, everything that what it means. But at the end, over here, you see that there's a column and it's stated exactly where we talk about these subjects. And with a link, if you click on there, you directly go to that part of the annual report. So again, help the reader to consume the information. Yeah, so a lot of work, sometimes buried under work, first year, but we're just getting started. And I think it's fair to say that the first year is the heavy lifting, but we also have new things are coming, still on the way. So one of the things we can talk about is electronic reporting. And those people with a finance background, they probably know of the ISFC filings. So we start working with taxonomies, and we need to start tagging data and block tag content. Well, that's also coming for the sustainable statements. Okay, so a little updates. We were in the middle of the reporting season on the CSRD, and then we got the update from the Omnibus. And I think most people here know about the Omnibus, but just want to give you a clear picture. I just mentioned this, that we have done this year. It would have been the case in 2025. We have a new set of people, new set of companies, and scope on there that also should have been reporting according to CSRD. Well, that has been changed. The changes are, just to be clear, in time, it's now pushed forward to 2027. And also the scope of the companies that need to start reporting over CSRD has changed. It's broadened, so that means that less companies will need to start reporting over CSRD. It gives them a bit of extra air, a bit extra time to prepare, but it doesn't lower the bar. So be prepared, we still need to do this. Maybe good to know is that on the note of the assurance, we are at the moment at a limited assurance for our sustainability statements that would have gone to reasonable assurance, just like the financial statements. But that has also now indefinitely been postponed. We don't know if that will be cancelled. I don't hope so, but in the end, for now, the sustainable statements are at a limited assurance. So beyond compliance, I think it's fair to say that the clients, our clients, it's not anymore about ticking the boxes. They see the sustainable statements really as a strategic tool to have the narrative, to have the story, the communication to their stakeholders on what they are doing to get a better world. And of course, we have all the obligations of disclosure, those data points, and so on. But it's also used to tell about your vision, about your strategy, and how you can communicate that to your stakeholders. And talking about stakeholders, we also see that there is a shift in stakeholder engagement, because traditionally it is about communicating with your investors, the regulators, the shareholders, and so on. But now with the sustainability and CSRD, it's becoming to make a shift where there's more emphasis also on our own workforce, supply chain and our suppliers. And last but not least, just the people in the streets, because they are also conscious of what's going on. And the families with children, you know, children get educated at primary school, secondary school about sustainability, and they come home and they sit at the dinner table and they want to know, hey dad, hey mom, how is company XYZ doing? And that's something that companies now know, and also be prepared for that. So what we see, what is shifting, going on, patterns, I wouldn't say well, let's keep it a pattern, is that clients are also looking at options, other options to communicate, to publish their annual reports. So one of those things is the microsite. It's like an HTML version of the report. And if you look at these families, you know, the moms and dads, they're Googling. They're still boomers, they Google. But the kids, they use their phone and they want to also see what's going on. And then with microsites, it's very easy to search for that information and get directly to that point that you're looking at. Because they're not going to download a PDF and do something like Control F to find the specific information that they're looking for. No, so that's not happening. All right. Yeah, well, this is an example. It doesn't really matter on the content. I just want to show you guys an example of how a microsite could help in communicating information. So this is a nice interactive visual where you can click on a specific subject and get underlying subjects and get, as they call it, mega trends, and directly get more information. So it's, yeah, the microsites are a really modern way of communicating with these new stakeholders. You can also work with videos and so on, and really communicate your story, your narrative to the stakeholders. Yeah, then we have, of course, the electronic reporting. I slightly touched on that before. I think that's a subject by its own. We have seen it with the ISFC filings. We are still in the development of the taxonomy for the CSRD. There's already something there, but it's not mandatory to use that. But important for that is also to have the right tools in there and to make sure that you're able to start tagging and do the filing. And if we still look at the fundamentals that I start off with on CSRD, it's all about comparable. And we need to compare ourselves with others. So that's coming. That's also something that's still a hurdle to take. But most companies are already ready for that. So if we look at all the evaluations that we did with our clients at the end of the first year in CSRD, the first wave, what most of them say to us is, you know, if you start with the CSRD first year, have a reset for yourself, have a rethink on the whole process. Because as mentioned before, you know, it's a lot. So there's a lot of information that needs to be disclosed. But there's also a lot of information that you first have to source and that you have to validate and that you have to review and so on. It's not only about data, it's also about the whole process and who's involved. Because there are a lot of departments are involved. So make sure you have the right people in place. And the traditional process, what we still see with some companies, where it is done on the sites, and it's you have a lot of Excels and Word involved in there, and you throw it over the fence to a design agency that will come up with a first draft, and then it have to go back, and then you have some updates, and you throw it over the fence again, and that goes up and down like 40, 50 times before you come to the end results. Well, that doesn't really work anymore. Make sure that you have the whole process optimized with the right people and the right tools before you start working on the CSRD. All right. Well, that was my my talk for today. I will be available also at our coffee table if people have questions about the experience we had the first year. I'm ready to give some more feedback if you like to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arko. I think that was a very practical session in terms of what does it actually mean, the implementation and the data collection. I've seen a lot of different approaches to it, so I think that yours is one of the better ones I've seen. I think it's a competitive world, so I cannot wait to see what's going to happen in 10 years. I do think it's a competition between very advanced things now with AI, etc. So next up, we have a very interesting conversation. I can't wait. So yesterday we had Anne-Sophie Castelnau from ING Global Sustainability from ING. And today we have Eva Bučová, the first female CEO of a major Czech bank. So we're very proud and very happy here. She's actually been a real inspiration and role model. I remember that a year ago when we had our following intake of interns. I think all the females were very excited that we work with you. So that was very nice to see that people are very inspired and happy that you can aspire and to be at the top of Czech business. So with that, I would like to welcome to the stage Hugh Wheelan, a financial journalist, the founder of Responsible Investor, and Eva Bučová, CEO of ING Czech Republic. Welcome.
Hello. Good, it works.
Hello everyone, thanks, great to be back. And thanks to Linda for the introduction, and just to note also that my title as financial journalist and sort of reflects the fact that I've been a finance journalist for almost 30 years now, probably too long, and also specialised around about the early 2000s in sustainability and finance, the intersection between the two. It's a great privilege to be here on stage with Eva Bučová. I hope that's somewhere near
Absolutely,
reasonable pronunciation. And before I get into conversation with Eva, I just wanted to say a big congratulations to the organisers of this conference. I've been to a lot of conferences over my career, far too many, and I thought that the content yesterday, particularly the keynotes that we heard, were fantastic, and maybe just provide a little bit of context to this conversation. We heard a brilliant presentation, and I'd recommend anyone to try and get hold of the slides from Professor Farmer at Oxford, where he was looking at the big megatrends in energy, using huge data sets and probability on how that transition is taking place. And I think that's the sort of meta narrative around what we're talking around here, on decarbonisation and transition. And then we had also a great presentation from Dirk Schoonemaker from Erasmus University in Rotterdam, where he was looking at then the GDP effects across different sectors of what is happening both in terms of energy transition and regulation. And now we're going to drop down to look at the reality of what that means for companies here in Czechia in terms of decarbonisation and transition plans. And maybe just to kick off, I'd like to get a sort of reality check from Eva about why Czech companies should be putting in place decarbonisation thinking alongside transition plans. We've heard quite a bit about the stop the clock on the EU regulation stuff, but give us a sense, Eva, of what's happening here on the ground with the companies that you deal with every day, talking to them about business strategy and transition and where we're at right now.
Hugh, thanks a lot. Thank you, Linda. I don't know where you disappeared in the meantime.
We'll be here somewhere, I think.
Yeah, okay. For a very nice and warm welcome. We have been part of Sustainable Summit since the beginning, so I'm really happy to see how it is evolving into a real discussion platform, combining all stakeholder groups, being banks, financial sector, being corporates, regulators, but also science and research. And I think I will be speaking a little bit about it. But before answering your question, which is very much to the point, I turn the question to the audience. Pick up your hand if you believe that sustainability is on the daily table of your business and your discussions.
Okay, that's pretty good, actually.
Very happy to see that, because 5 years...
Maybe being at a sustainability conference, that, well, you never know, but yeah.
We have the right people here, right? So from that perspective, it was self-navigating questions. At the same time, I think we are those who are bringing sustainability also to the wider audience. And I think that's the purpose of decarbonization and transition plans. Decarbonization is not a new topic. All of us have been living with decarbonization, probably some of us even more than a decade. And what is it about? It's also a business case, decarbonization. Because when looking at the prices of emission allowances, it's not a business case, medium term nor long term anymore. So the clients and the companies need to be really inventive what they are going to do in the future. And obviously, if they do something, we also are in a society now where we like transparency, we like predictability, we like resilience. Although we don't see much of it on the markets right now, we as consumers and the suppliers as such like to see, as well as investors and the banks, and like to understand what their companies are doing, what they are going to focus on, what is pretty much the priority in their business. And I hope to bring today to the discussion real business cases, because obviously we all have been at the table with our clients who are saying that reporting is difficult. At the same time, the moment they start doing it, they realize how many data points they have. We thought probably in the past that we are actually making sustainable choices because we have information and data. Do you think so? Did we have the data in the past? Now we know, right, that we didn't and we don't. And pretty much that's the purpose. The moment you start digging into data, you need to use it. And I think we heard it a couple of times today. Validate them, whether this is really something you see in your business and whether this is really something which can drive your business going forward this way. And what we are seeing is the more the clients understand the data, the better they are focused for the future. That's why decarbonization and transition plans. Transition plan as such is a new category, although the company have been essentially doing it already. It's just probably not that well structured, and probably not always it includes everything it needs to include. Meaning what precisely I want to do, how do I want to finance it, and what will be the outcome. So create a business case. And what we hear a lot from the clients is that indeed getting the data points and actually making them understand it through also research, science, what they are missing really is financial sector combined with suppliers, with investors. However, they are missing the science or universities. They are lacking this kind of academic background which can help them actually to focus their actions as well.
So Eva, when you go out to talk to companies here in the Czech Republic, and you say, listen, we have the framework for data collection on these sustainability issues. Do you, outside of the enlightened people in this room who are thinking around business, transition, sustainability, what do standard Czech companies say to you? What's the reality of what they're actually doing? Do they say, oh yes, we really must be paying more attention to the energy transition because it is going to affect our capital expenditure and potentially reduction in current business lines for new business lines? What's the real granular sense you get from people who are doing the hard work of running businesses and trying to make money, which is not easy to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely. And the question is also, what do you consider a standard client, right? For us, ING, we are here focused on top corporates. So from that perspective, my standard client is different from a standard client of a different bank. But I can speak out of my standard case. And obviously, there are clients who want to position themselves or did position themselves already as leaders. They definitely are more approachable. And the moment you start speaking about energy transition and transition plan, they kind of know what they are talking about or what you are talking about. First, because they have ratings, they have tradable market instruments, or they are issuer of big debt. From that perspective, they have ESG ratings. So they are being asked about these data points and about decarbonization. Whereas the clients who are probably undecided or probably not that courageous and are not willing to take that game, they are not that far. So I overheard from Petr already today, there are a couple of groups of clients. So there is nothing like standard client, right?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
At the same time, what you can count on, Hugh, is that currently they already understand, almost all of them, that whether they are in highly emission polluting sectors or not. And they also know that the attention of the banks is on those who produce most emissions. And this is how we introduce also our Terra approach. And many banks call it, or other banks call it differently, but we all have certain approaches how we actually want to see sectors move towards net zero. Because all of us, as we are sitting here, know what net zero commitment is. Right.
So you're going into particular sectors and saying, this is what we expect from you, and this is what we are going to hold you to for loaning money and structuring transactions or whatever the work is.
Sector by sector, currently we have 12 sectors who are the most or largest contributors to the entire emissions. And what we do for our clients is exactly, first, give them an insight what that sector is doing, what their peers are doing. So for the first time, they can really compare how their peers are actually moving. Obviously, those who are already focused on it a couple of years, they know. But for the rest, definitely not. And also, what actually innovation is happening in that particular sector. How can they actually introduce it? Do they have access? For example, if you want to produce steel with hydrogen, is this the right place? Is this the right time? Is there really an option to do so? What is needed there? Does it make sense to actually rely on this technology? Or we can move to a different one. How many technologies and approaches there are actually available? So it's a really complex discussion, and it's actually very enlightening. And subsequently, after that discussion, the client needs to start researching, looking into that, getting data, and try to figure out where is the business case for him. It's not an easy job.
Was that a particular way of structuring the way you talk with clients and emphasizing? You obviously emphasize the business rationale for transition that is coming as a result of technology regulation. How do you structure that? Is that kind of discussion you're having?
Exactly. Every relationship manager has ownership of a certain sector. Every relationship manager is connected to the sector experts. So the moment he goes to the clients, he knows, I am in this sector has these issues, this sector needs to move towards this type of innovation or this type of technology. How can I help my client? Where is my client, and how can I actually bring relevant knowledge to him?
Okay. Let's just sort of go slightly helicopter again and look at how the Czech government is positioned to either enable those kind of discussions or make them more difficult. And I realize that this is a political question, so you may have to walk around it a little bit. But what is the current policy framework in the Czech Republic in tandem with the EU, and how does it sit in terms of that discussion around decarbonisation and transition?
I think most of our clients are really struggling with the fact that we are very fragmented in the EU. So each country has different decision-making when it comes to decarbonization. They are in a different state of actually opinion and different state of commitment. All of us committed to net zero 2050. All of us have the same final commitment, but we are not going the same direction, the same route. We should be. And this is causing a lot of confusion. So there are certain very high expectations that actually the government will give the direction, will actually go and first say, how do we going to achieve that? In what time frame? How much investment is needed? And what the client should do sector by sector? It's not there. And this is really causing them feeling actually alone with this topic. They actually appreciate that the banks are pushing them in a way because they are not alone. They know that there is somebody who is who has some level of expertise. Obviously, we are not businessmen, but we have certain expertise which we can share from across the globe. At the same time, we also know what needs to be achieved, or we kind of sense. But don't take me wrong, until 2030, probably many of us see how this can be delivered. But beyond 2030, in many sectors, it's very difficult. And a lot of disruption will be needed, a lot of innovation. And the companies are aware of that. And they are really, in this field, they are totally alone. And they really need a help with that because they are committed. They want to do 2050 net zero. But in many sectors, they have no idea how to get there.
How much did my apologies for my ignorance, but how much did this play into the Czech elections? 2023 was it? I think the last elections. And how much is it broadly part of the conversation in the country, which can also help to mobilize politicians? Is that a difficult question here, or
yeah,
not?
It is definitely a difficult question, given the fact that there is a lack of leadership. It is really seen on the economy between in the connection between financial sector and business and also wider society. At the same time, I think bottom-up efforts are there from the corporates, but obviously without enabling environment, as we hear it, it's not easy. And you have only you have certain limitations with such a case. At the same time, buy into that wider public, and I think we spoke about it yesterday evening during the event. We are creating here a little bit of a bubble. We are really experts in what we are doing. We are embracing sustainability in our corporates, but does really the rest of the world understand what we are doing? Is it really something which people can associate with, connect with? And understand that this might not be only about increasing their price of living, because currently climate change in Czech Republic is already going and eating into our cost, eating into our decision making, eating into the territories we go for holidays. And people don't realize that. They are afraid. It's a complex topic and they don't understand it. So on the political side, it's very difficult to take a stance.
So you mean that at the moment the cafes of Prague are not full with discussion around the omnibus, and there may be some work to do about translation there of what's happening on EU regulation into the general lives of people here on the ground, energy prices, what this means for competitivity of the country and its businesses. Talk a bit, Eva, about where you see in the country the most important sectors in terms of decarbonisation and transition. We saw some really interesting data from the Professor Skånemark yesterday about different countries and where they sit in terms of GDP impacts around transition. What are the main sectors in the Czech Republic that have both risks and opportunities around decarbonisation, and how might they start to change in your view as we go forward?
I think it's very obvious. It's energy, cement, steel, transportation. I think all of us are kind of aware, and it's not a difficult exercise. And let me probably repeat what I said also yesterday at one of the tables. For me, although sustainability is complex, it's a relatively simple thing. You look at your emissions as a country, you see precisely which industries are major contributors. You can, based on the data which are available already now, and we have, for example, an open platform, Fakta o klimatu, you know precisely where the emissions are being created, even in which companies. So you just focus on those, and you first commit those to really do the necessary steps, help them, support them in a very focused manner, and then you can move to the others. It's very simple in my way, and this is really the question of leadership. And how they are going to change, they are already changing a lot. Yeah, there is a lot of renewable resources coming in, although we might not see that on an everyday basis. We might see technical obstacles, how to put them really into connection, into working, how to get them to the grid. What is the price really of electricity? Because there is a narrative you need to deal with, that everything which is related to green energy is very expensive. All that, I think you can address in a very smart way, and you can even work with that to really make it affordable, because the key to our competitiveness in Europe and in Czech Republic is indeed, and I think we all agree on that, affordable price of energy. Otherwise, given the fact that we are an industrial country, we cannot really move ahead and try to really believe we will be the most competitive country in the world. At the same time, we have the right spirit. We have the really experienced people. It's a human capital. We are very good at producing things, and already now 20% of our exports is green products. And we can expand that. They are actually experiencing double-digit growth. We have that. We have that. We are doing it already. And also, when it comes to decarbonization transition, many companies are already doing it, more than you think. The moment we sit down at the table with them, we realize that they are doing all the right things. Energy efficiency in banks, right, has been 25 years. 25 years we have been drawing lines from EIB or EBRD on energy efficiency. That is a topic we know, we just call it differently now, it's sustainability. Also, renewable energy. This has been in place already since 20 years, although there are certain parts like solar which are very difficult. There is renewable energy. There is still potential for renewable energy. The country has it all. We just really need a proper leadership to get there.
I think we've just heard an example of proper leadership, a bit of bravery, some simple home truths, and really well constructed and argued. Our thanks to Eva for that. Great to have been here asking the questions. I think it's probably time to hand over to our next session. We're out of time. Great, and thanks to see you all here again. Look forward to seeing you later in the day. I suppose I should do a quick plug before I go for this afternoon's session on competitive, I can't even remember the title of the session, but I'm doing some discussion about communications and sustainability strategy. So do join us for that roundtable this afternoon. Great to have Eva here on stage again. And thanks to you all. If we could show our appreciation in the usual fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think that was a very energetic session. Eva's passion is amazing, and her love for the country and for the region, I think, goes a long way. And I do think that part of this event is also to remain honest and to send some clear messaging to those who are in power and in these leadership positions. Because unfortunately, well, there are politics involved, etc., but what we've seen in other countries, and this is maybe for the Czech Republic and others to learn, is that if you have very strong collaborations between different sectors, different stakeholder groups that are aligned on the messaging, aligned on the needs, and then mount a public campaign requesting change, it is much easier for the political parts of the system to enact it. So what we need to learn is to be a lot more effective in terms of the pressure, how we get to where we want to go. But with that, I would like to introduce the next session, chaired by my lovely colleague Julian, professional moderator of all sorts of sessions. And he will dive deeper into the transformation of business and industry. We have some super exciting panelists. So I would like to welcome the next panel onto the stage and Julian to introduce them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. And yeah, let's see about the moderation. I see my speakers slowly coming to the front. That's great. So yes, we will be looking into industry decarbonization and the link connection to competitiveness. So in other words, how exactly is the EU industrial policy and sustainability policy, how is it shaping the competitiveness of the EU, but also of CEE? We'll try to bring it back to the region. Some could say this is one of the most important panels of the session or of the summit. I don't know, but the industry decarbonization and industry in our region, in the countries here, is definitely one of the biggest topics, but very complex as well. So first, we can maybe already see it on the stage, I'm going to introduce the speakers because we have a very interesting panel where I hope we can cover the 360 degrees of decarbonization, because it's not only policy, it's not only finance, it's quite a few different parts. So please, if I may kindly invite, I'll go from the left here, Sebastian Rath to the stage, please. So Sebastian is Board Strategy Advisor and European Climate Pact Ambassador, but also has spent a long time in insurance, in risk, and also advising insurance companies and financial. Feel free to sit. Good to have you. Then we have Marta Mikliszańska as well, coming from Allegro, Director of Group Public Policy.
Dobrý den.
Dobrý den. You can sit, by the way. This is please. I'll still stand, but again, representing a major digital platform as well, and we'll go into digitalisation a little bit too. And then we have, and I'm really glad we have Zdenek, Mr. Zdenek Petzl, Executive Director of Automotive Industry Association. This is, dobrý den, please. And not even going into this, but automotive industry in Czech Republic, Slovakia, incredibly crucial sector, and I really hope you also will have many questions. And then last but not least, really glad to have Zuzana Karp as well, founder of Cleantech for CEE, but also Zuzana, a renowned policy and climate expert who spent a long time in Brussels, also previously Deputy Director of Cleantech for Europe. Now, I'm sitting there. Good. Now, we have limited time, and normally when I start any sessions, I have this tendency to speak for too much, and then I realize it's like 10 minutes out. I'm not going to actually say anything, especially anything long. I don't think we need to necessarily introduce the topic as such, because we know, I think, industry and decarbonization of industry linking to competitiveness, especially now with Draghi report, with competitiveness compass, with all these new policies coming in and what is happening in China, in the US, with strong capital markets, with efficiency in China. This actually has been a pretty big discussion on the news lately with all these, let's say, strategic changes at the EU. So instead of going too deep into this, essentially what we want to answer here is, can Europe, and even going to CE, can we be competitive now in this environment of sustainability, climate, and digitalization targets of the EU? Can we still remain competitive? This is something we want to answer. When I say we, I actually mean you. I will do my best to have this discussion, but also I'm hoping to get some of these answers. But, and I think this has been discussed in many other panel discussions before, I think we even called it in the agenda, it's called Conversation with the Audience. The reason why we do that, and I think maybe Linda may have already explained, is that we want to engage you as well, because there are all these practitioners from different sectors, different walks of life. So let's go into this now already, but then definitely let's open for some questions, and I also very much invite you to react to each other, or potentially even ask questions of each other, because why not? And by an accident, you're sitting next to me, and I really wanted to start with you, because we do need to set the scene a little bit. And I think you're really well positioned for that, because as I explained, you worked on clean tech, on essentially energy transition and the topics of decarbonization for a long time, as an expert working on engaging with different companies and different clean tech companies, but also really following what is happening at the policy and the strategic level at the EU. And can you, maybe not everyone is following that closely, can you maybe give some kind of overview in terms of what exactly is changing and evolving at the EU when it comes to decarbonization of industry?
Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to join this really important conversation, as well as this great summit. So I've really enjoyed listening to the previous speakers as well, and this is meant to be an open conversation, so I'm sure we'll have a chance to exchange amongst the panelists, but also hearing from those in the audience. Julian, to your question, you've already mentioned competitiveness, you've already mentioned the Draghi report. Well, this is a little bit the name of the game in Brussels at the moment. And it's important to understand why we got to this point, because the European Union has been having a serious awakening over its various shortcomings when it came in the past to scaling the innovation that it was developing inside. So the classic example that is used at nearly every Brussels discussion on competitiveness is how Europe, developed the solar industry, but then was not able to scale it in the EU to the point where now a very small amount of the solar supply chain is also manufactured in the European Union. So this is sort of and this replicated also on, other waves of technologies where Europe was seen to have missed out. Really, and so now we're seeing in Brussels, in the EU, that this great awakening also comes from the fact that member states alone are not actually able to compete themselves on their own as the previous model, let's say, was suggesting, right? So in the past, we thought, well, Germany was competitive at a global level. Well, it still is, but when it comes to just how quick other actors are moving in scaling innovation, and of course, I'm thinking of China, but I'm thinking of other actors as well. And the United States was moving really fast. Now it's having a moment of fuzziness. We don't know what will come out of it. But nonetheless, the global race for these innovative technologies, who will dominate the future industrial landscape, this is on at the moment. And so the competitive advantages that Europe still has, we're seeing them diminishing very quickly on timeframes that look like 18 months or less. And so in this broader discussion, and of course we have a new European Parliament, a new European Commission, the plan was, or the idea was, to try to promote something or kind of push the European Union in a direction where it's able to move quickly. And with purpose and following a strategy. So not just disjointed points of action and suggestions and different pieces of legislation, but really sort of get its act together and go forward. Now, I won't go into whether that's happening or not, but I'll go into the role of the region of Central and Eastern Europe in this whole broader puzzle. So the Draghi report that we've all heard about has a huge oversight. And that oversight is its absence of consideration for Central and Eastern Europe as a key region in Europe's global competitiveness game. Why? Well, because if we're talking scale in the European Union, well, that's going to be happening here, as well as in some parts of Scandinavia, so Northern Europe, and broadly speaking, Central and Eastern Europe, because right now, there's not even availability for land for, well, warehouses or factories or so. Building something new in France, and not just in France, in Belgium, in Germany, is really complicated. So if we're trying to reach scale, we're going to have to look to places where we can actually build, and places where we actually have a skilled labor force with an engineering base, that is Central and Eastern Europe. And so there's many aspects which make this region a potential key driver of competitiveness. However, the region is poorly integrated, and this is where I want to just very briefly correct also my title, because I'm a co-founder of Clean Tech for Central and Eastern Europe. I've joined forces with a foundation for tech entrepreneurship in Poland. My co-founder is here in the room, because our vision is really that as we develop the ecosystems for R&D and for innovation, for scaling this innovation in our countries, we should also seek to connect the region more. What is to prevent wind made offshore, so offshore wind power generated in the Black Sea off the coast of Romania to be connected, through high-distance cables to industry in the Czech Republic. Well, there's a lot of things preventing that from happening now, but the technology exists. So in principle, we could be doing that. And that's just one example, and I'll stop there because I'm sure you'll give me a chance to speak again. But so that's a little bit to give the background.
Let's see. Yes, I will. No, of course. But okay, no. But what I'm hearing, and I'll actually try to link it, and I will not go one by one here. But yes, so we also co-founded Clean Tech for CE, as you said, because there's so many different challenges that we need to address, which again also can be addressed, and I believe that's your case as well in terms of opportunities, right? There's so much opportunity for collaboration, for integration, which then leads to competitiveness. also, usually when you have opportunity, there's also certain risk, and also what we're discussing, all these changes, how the policy and the strategy at the EU level is evolving. That is, again, some kind of balance in terms of risk and opportunities. And I'm going to turn to Sebastian, who somehow here you are representing financial sector.
Well, yeah, thanks, Julian.
No, but I mean, because you have worked on quite a few different topics, obviously risk, and also in terms of insurance has been very much the core, but also you have been working with financial institutions. And I'm actually curious, and we are still at that more setting the scene level, when we talk about all these different, like actually being able to navigate, you know, the industry decarbonization / focus on competitiveness / climate, very strict climate goals and EU Green Deal, which still exists and very much is here. Like, how is this actually perceived by financial sector when it comes to, maybe, I don't know if you have any experiences maybe from Germany or what you see in terms of like how is the financial sector reacting to some of those changes?
Good. So fantastic question. Thank you for that, Julian. I mean, happy to be in Prague. I would say I'm proud European. It's a German myself. Spent 10 years professionally working in financial services in London and now from the Netherlands. And worked with the CE countries from Poland down to Turkey and Greece. And I think 2025 in that sense is a bit of a special year. So I think we do have to reflect a bit back where we come from and where we're going to move forward. So on my sense, it's a sort of career path combining 20 years of de-risking through insurance, working around about 10 years with banks on the sort of financing, investing part, also through the sort of asset side of the insurers, of course, and increasingly with the sort of transitioning across all sectors. That's partly in-house with companies, partly in strategy consulting, and sort of coming to this sort of pivotal moment when things sort of start to freeze and not work, like end of last year. So the question I think that we're looking at now is a bit sort of where are we in our journey in terms of looking at these opportunities, right? Because I think to the uninitiated non-sustainability crowd, I sort of tend to describe what we're trying to aim for in the most simple terms. And in many ways, we're doing this sort of tightrope walk, right? So we're standing on this big rubber band. We try to cross from one side of the valley to the other side of the valley, and we see this landscape of risks. And we say, well, we enjoy this, right? Because this is the opportunities. We see economic risk, financial risks. We try to structure them and say, okay, good. The whole point is to look good, to not fall down, and to move forward. And the whole point, I think, that is most important to me at this stage is the moving forward part, right? Because there is this cost of inaction that we all know about that, again, sounds too abstract for the general public. So in this year, the one thing that I've started to change is to be much more targeted in sort of also reaching out to civil society to allow companies to really translate better where the next level of opportunities are that we try to elevate and move forward. And there, I think we're still struggling as a sort of community of people because we have much jargon, much policy. But what we want is regionalization of more solutions. So yes, we want to scale, but that also means we want to plug in more jobs in the future that are going to be there for foreseeable time and tell that story in an attractive, easy way. That still means there is this risk of falling down the wire. And some of our industries get some, I would say, heavy punches at the moment, right? Do we enjoy that? Not really, but we still have to deal with it, and we can deal with it, obviously. And the last 1.5 days, I think, are testimony to this. We still move forward. We try to simplify a little bit. That maybe means moving 2 steps forward. Not really a step back. I mean, occasionally sort of pause, maybe a little bit back and then double forward also works, right? But I think the direction of travel is ultimately very clear. On insurance, there is the big de-risking part. On investment, I think it tends to be leading. And the one call that I would make is let's be more outspoken in the next few months and weeks and quarters ahead on where are these financeable opportunities that we funnel and that we will address, because I think priorities will translate into a better sort of funding funnel and then a much stronger engagement, and then get better visibility locally for the electorate and voters, etc., to sort of see, aha, these opportunities are coming. And this is not easy, but I think it's going to happen.
Thanks, Sebastian. So, okay, so the scene has been set. I'm glad about that. And you mentioned that the direction is clear, we need to keep moving, and we can do that. Well, now I will turn to Mr. Petzl, because I'm curious if he can make this, and if he can actually do that, and I'm really glad you are here representing the automotive industry, which is probably one of the industries most impacted by some of the climate and decarbonization goals of the EU. And I imagine this topic and these questions have been something you've been dealing with lately a lot. But I'm curious, coming from the automotive industry, which has some of the strictest goals, which are very much impacting the actual sales and the essentially transition of the industry within the global fierce competition. And we see what is happening in China. We see how the pressure here for the electric vehicles in Europe. I don't want to keep it too broad, but I would be actually very curious to just actually hear you comment on what are some of the main challenges. For example, what are the discussions you are having here at Czechia? But also, if maybe looking at solutions, what is some kind of policy clarity? Like, what is what you need currently from the EU to be more competitive as an industry?
Finally the question, right? What we need from the EU. There are many things that we would need, but I'd say the first thing would be that we use this new period of 5 years that we have the new parliament, the new commission, that the EU reassess the impact of all the legislation that was adopted in the last legislative period, because it was really a legislative storm. And adding to the storm, or perhaps let's say fire, another wood to let it burn even stronger, is definitely not a solution. We see the issues looming in many areas. I'll try to give you some examples. For example, one of the key regulations in our sector is the famous or infamous Euro 7 regulation. That's the regulation of the gas emissions from the exhaust, not the CO2, not the global gases, but the other ones. The EU decided just during the last regulatory period that there will be Euro 7 and that it will start to apply starting 26 onwards. Somehow it was forgotten that there is a need for implementing regulation that will actually tell the companies how to prepare the cars, the models for that regulation. And that implementing work is just sort of ongoing. There are a few key areas that need to be done and cleared. One is perhaps finished, one might finish sometimes during the second half of this year, and the last one is unknown. What is known, nonetheless, that the regulation should be in force 2026. How can you even imagine to prepare a car, which usually takes at least several years of planning, designing, getting all the components, all the dealers and suppliers on board? How can you imagine doing it without actually giving the industry time to do it? So there's already one of the issues that we see with the EU right now. There are more, of course. What we see is that again, the EU should regulate less, perhaps be more on the project side of the things. We have seen that there are a lot of nice ideas circulating on EU level, but we're actually shooting ourselves in the leg by not implementing them in a project reasonable way as you would do it in your own company. So this is sort of the general gist, and then in next questions you can go further what exactly needs to be done in different areas like industrial policy, labor policy, education policy, or even a model planning, the all often discussed battery, electricity, mobility versus the other modes of transport. Yep.
Thank you so much, Noven. We'll touch on that, and now I'll just finish the circle here, and you already touched on overregulation. Now we see with omnibus and with changes in, essentially we see some kind of de-scoping or reducing regulation, simplification as we see it. And I go to you, Marta, because you do work on policy. It's a large organization, but also like a digital platform, but with so many stakeholders involved in terms of supply chains and so many like sellers, obviously, on Allegro. I imagine Omnibus, especially for you, reporting on CSRD and being in scope of the regulation has had an impact on you. What we often hear is that, okay, well, Omnibus is definitely changing the scope and some companies are not there and data will be missing, but at the same time we hear, well, hopefully the banks will create some kind of pressures for companies to still report, or the supply chains, right? I'm quite curious whether this is something you see happening as well, and how do you even engage with some of your supply chains when, you know, when they suddenly are not in scope of legislation, which I feel is a pretty big incentive in this region.
Thank you for all these questions. Good morning, everyone. Today I would like to share some practical hints and practical reflections over the last year and the CSRD reporting, because we were in this small group, relatively small group of the companies that reported according to the new regulation. And of course I would be happy to show some maybe challenges that we had, definitely challenges for the team, and also from the cost-wise perspective. There are lots things to be really improved, and it costs us a lot. But of course, it's an interesting fact, because today I realized that there is no accident that maybe, you know, because we've been speaking about regulations that much, and this policy environment, policy framework within the EU and within the region, and maybe there is no accident that I'm also responsible for public affairs, for regulatory affairs at Allegro, and also for ESG. So of course I have this separate team of people who are responsible for ESG, but it's combined, right? So, and maybe there is no accident that as a Polish company, we're the first Polish company that opened its small office in Brussels this year. So we can be more present and we can be more active, proactive in this public debate. Oh, this fly is coming here. So I'm saying it just to show you how complex this and how challenging this sphere of ESG is. When I joined Allegro 7 years ago, we've been starting with this, you know, it was just the CSR thing that we've been developing for years. So charity, education initiatives, a little bit of, you know, actions for environment, but it wasn't really like this professional ESG approach. Then we became this public company, so we entered the Warsaw Stock Exchange, and we had to really remodel our thinking and the format. And now we are, after this 1 year of practicing, exercising, like having this exercise, CSRD exercise. And we thought when we started to start our process, like reporting process last year, we thought that we were quite well prepared, because we didn't want to wait until the very last moment. We had this dry run. The previous year, we had this dry run with the auditor, and we thought that we were quite well prepared. No, the reality was that we were not prepared to the new regulations. I mean, all those guidelines were so vague, and so we had to face so much of the subjective assessment of the auditors, that there were no like agreement even between the consulting company that was helping us to make this reporting done. There was there were some arguments, and there was no agreement between the consultancy and the auditors. They were like, you know, having those arguments over this double materiality, about risk assessment. You know, there's like a long list of things that they were like arguing about. So we were like watching it, you know, with a lot of interest, you know, how it would end. And this year was also very challenging for us and interesting, because at the same time, as a company, we're responsible for value creation which I think it's the main goal, right? As a platform, we enable our merchants, over 150,000 of merchants, small and medium enterprises, and mainly not from the large cities, but mainly from rural and small cities from Poland, but also from the region, from Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, now where we operate. So we help them to develop, and we help them to grow, and we help them to also not only sell their products on our platform, but also to export their products. On the other hand, as you said, there is like this is the large group of the stakeholders that we have. So on the other hand, there are consumers. We also help them to help this to keep this value creation. We help them, we are giving them security, but also good price selection and convenience. So it was something that we had to work on. Second thing was the competitiveness. So in this very challenging market and very, I would say, uncompetitive market because of this market fragmentation within the EU, but also with this outside the EU countries, platforms coming to Europe and compliant to the local regulations, European regulations, but also local regulations. We were the company that was like compliant with the regulations. We want to be the good citizens. So we had to spend like a lot of hours to also be compliant. So this competitiveness, this is the second thing. And at the same time, we had to spare like a lot of time to have this reporting process, which was very costful. It cost us a lot of money also for these auditors, and also we had to invest, and I'm happy about it, of course, because it's a long-term investment, but we had to invest into this automatic data tool, which is helping with collecting the data. But of course, the data needs to be checked and controlled. So we had to train our data providers, and we had to train our data controllers to be sure that, that this data is adequate and accurate, and it will win with the, when speaking to auditors. So my team, small team of people, was working with dozens of people within the organization, almost 100 people, if not more, working over hours. Very often not being sure because of this, ambiguity of some guidelines and some regulations. We were not sure if we were doing the right thing, and of course it took us 6 months to make it done, and we did it. But during this 6 months, my team and the other team, that we have been working with, could spend at least half of this time for making a real impact for business. So that's what I'm saying. That's, of course, I was always like a huge advocate of reporting obligations as something that is, supporting transparency and supporting, transparency also for investors, but also for consumers. But now I'm thinking how much time we have to spend to really meet the obligations instead of really making a sustainable business and making a real change on the market. Maybe my words are a little bit like, acid and bitter acid. But after this process and after this exercise of the last year, I must say I was very disappointed with how much engagement it was needed. And I was thinking myself, do we really need this to be so much, complicated and so much and so complex to really get the aim and to reach the aim that was at the beginning?
Julian.
Thank you.
Julian, if you allow me, I think Marta raised a really good point. In the EU right now, we are creating a market that is really diverged. There is a lot of pressure on the EU companies to follow all the regulations, and these companies actually do it, just like Marta showed with Allegro. On the other hand, you're allowing the competitors from the outside, with China, Temu, that hasn't been mentioned by name, but of course that's the one. We have the same case in automotive. So if there is another thing that EU need to focus on is to not only rethink the rules, but really follow through with the fact that they should, that all the companies on the market need to adhere to those rules.
The enforcement.
Okay, I hear you. By the way, I'm conscious we do have a timer here which says we have 5 minutes, but I actually understand we have time until 12:30, which is 15 minutes. So ignore the timer. And I do think that's correct, by the way. Okay, so I'll come back to that because, I mean, that's one side. I would also hope that collecting and processing all this data can give you some kind of maybe strategic picture, which potentially could lead to some competitiveness, but let's explore. I saw Sebastian wanted to maybe react also to what Marta was originally saying.
So yeah, I think, I mean, on the one hand, for sure, we need this pragmatism, right? And in part of that, there is simplicity. I think the one aspect that I think we also experienced 2025 is aspects of silent cancellation of earlier goals or ambitions that were there for very good reason. So I'm not saying that this comes from Europe, but I think the further, for example, we slip away from a 1.5 degree goal, that has real implications and that has real costs and that has real impacts for, I mean, we discussed in the earlier panel where Eva was speaking on behalf of banks, and many organizations say, good, we're taking the ambitions of society into our equation, which we have to, because that's ultimately the client base we serve for in the future. So I think there is an element of even active cancellation as you start to see interference with research, interference with data availability. And that's certainly in my area of, say, weather and climate risk management. And that's something which I think as organizations we find unprepared for to even address, because it has an element of risk. And being very outspoken on these topics is quite relevant. Because the more we embrace science, we move forward as organizations. And if funding, for example, is needed for batteries at a certain time frame, then by all means, we need to be outspoken about this. But the more science gets backloaded, we are slipping on certain targets. And I think that's something which is quite fundamental in that discussion on pragmatism and simplicity as well. So I think it's a bit of a interesting challenge in the next 24 months.
That is indeed, and I agree, but I actually want to go, Zdenek, to you, because then you mentioned the EU7, and there's really strict regulations, as we said, which is, it does indeed impact the industry, which is not only the car brands we know, but it's also all the suppliers, which is very much connected to that. But I'm curious, because now, with the climate law and with the EU Green Deal, and even now still with the competitiveness, I still believe that EU Green Deal and sustainability is very much a pillar in the competitiveness strategy as well. But at the same time, you know, some of the regulation is a little bit slower, some of the, as you said, decisions and maybe guidance is coming a little bit slower. So on that note, we were also discussing maybe like, what are some of the potential support mechanisms that you as industry representative do you think we need, but also what do we see being the strategy and some of the goals and regulation coming, like, do you think this is in any way viable strategy? Like, is this any way to even compete with China, for example, in some of these? Or what is like one that one element you are missing, maybe apart from, let's say, clarity in the policy? Is there any other support that could be provided by the Commission?
The fact is that the business doesn't really need support. What it needs is less, let's say, bricks being thrown into the wheels, which is how we do regulation in Europe. Let's look at some examples. Just like the Euro 7, the emissions regulation, there is another major regulation for us, the CO2 regulation. That's the target for a battery electric only mobility by 2035, but it of course has milestones like 25, 30, etc. So for this year, for 25, the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, were supposed to bring to the market around 25% of their sales in battery electric vehicles. What we have seen in the market, though, the market reality, the interest of the customers was maximally 15%. This 10% gap not only means the penalties for the manufacturers, which of course wouldn't help in any way in their competition towards the outside of Europe, but as well that means that it sends ripples through the supply chain. The OEMs clearly planned to reach their target, so they planned the production of the certain percentage of battery vehicles. But since the market is not buying, you cannot so simply build them and put them somewhere on parking space and wait till the next year till somebody actually buys them. So they try to reshuffle their model portfolio. They try to add more hybrids, etc., which led to lack of specific products for the vehicles, like tanks, petrol gas tanks, or exhaust systems, etc. So this is something that creates a lot of troubles for us, which runs the system inefficiently and creates a lot of losses. Just the one with Euro 7, there will be an amount of vehicles that could have been sold if the OEMs knew what kind of vehicles to prepare for the market. So basically the EU is losing money on the economy that has not been run to its fullest potential, and by that we actually are losing money to finance our ideas of Green Deal.
But that actually opens a question, which this is probably a question that you would discuss with your friends over a beer as well, and you obviously electric vehicles, the complexities, there's no infrastructure and so on. And when you said, okay, people are not really buying, there's no demand, are we talking maybe Czech Republic or the region, let's say? Because obviously I think there's differences in the countries. And this is true, and it's often being discussed. I would be curious, by the way, how do you see the role of the automotive industry association as well in potentially building up that demand? Maybe, I don't know if it's some kind of potentially education or enlightenment of some of the customers, or maybe like what can for example, what do you do in terms of trying to increase the demand, if that's the direction or strategic direction of the EU, if you're actually moving towards the EVs and we see some other countries being successfully maybe with higher demand? Is there something we can do, or maybe something you could do?
Yeah, well, the first thing is obviously, again, the EU level, that there should be no targets set into stone without actually creating some kind of conditions to allow to reach those targets, really tackling the issue with a project manner. Then what we see right now, for example, what we've seen in the strategic dialogue that the Commission had with the industry at the beginning of this year, a lot of issues that you mentioned, the charging infrastructure, access to the grid, the Commission simply puts that issue to member states. Hey guys, I did a regulation, you do something right now to make the thing happen. 27 countries, obviously a huge diverging market. Not everything is working everywhere, so this is not the way how to actually achieve success at European level if we create specific market levels that actually distort the whole market. The 15% of the cars being sold versus the idea of or the need for 25, it's the whole EU. So even though we have countries that are better performing, especially the Nordic countries, the system as a whole does not work. What the associations can do, I mean, we actually worked really hard with our government since many, many years ago, since at least 2016, since when I'm a director of the association. We have come with specific programs, be it subsidy support programs, be it change and amendments to the laws and regulations that would make clean vehicles economically much more viable to the businesses, which obviously is the main purchaser of those vehicles. So this is something that we can do, but there are huge obstacles right now, for example, in access to the grid, which requires a lot of investments, which is something that a country either won't do because of lack of visions or won't do because of lack of funding. So we need to do more, and definitely there needs to be more shift towards pan-European solutions for that.
Thank you so much, and I will continue to Susanna, which I saw you nodding your head in the different answers, so I will let you react if there's anything you want to comment on, but also being conscious, you know, coming from Brussels, coming back to Warsaw, working on clean tech, I believe grid is one of the topics maybe looking into, and also some of the challenges, obstacles, as Zdenek mentioned, right? So maybe to bring it a bit more to Poland, it's the CE conference, maybe if you want to comment to anything previous, but also wanted to know maybe in terms of energy transition, some of the obstacles you're currently looking at, and what are some of the strategies you can even maybe deploy to improve it or to fix it?
Okay, so quite a lot of questions and also points I want to share as reflections to what previous speakers have said. And so I'll have a reflection on Marta's story of how difficult the accounting has been. And I absolutely feel for you. And it's interesting to hear that because most of the times I hear from innovators and smaller companies who are also struggling. They look to the big companies, and so the smaller companies are struggling, for example, to have teams that can apply for innovation funding in the European Union, and so in a way it made me think that maybe there can be a way of sharing some of insights and concerns. But on accounting, I understood the whole net zero project to be one of accounting. Basically, we don't know how else to talk about, so what is net zero? How will we know we are at net anything? Hopefully net zero or net negative. But so, I mean, the world has actually put itself on a massive accounting journey, and it's going to be really difficult. So it's good we're learning from lessons such as those you've experienced, but I don't think the solution is not to measure this data that we weren't measuring previously. Yeah,
it's not my point. It was only about simplification of the format. I'm very much for reporting itself, right? It's more about how to do it.
Yeah, and then another reflection on sort of this connection between competitiveness and industry, and sort of how it's been done so far. Why is Europe lacking competitiveness? One of the issues identified was over-cushioning European industries. So therefore they sort of did not feel the pressure of the global competition and did not innovate as quickly as others because we were over-cushioning with instruments. This applies to heavy industry, right? So we know in the EU ETS there's been extensive, sort of free allocation and to industry. And so actually we have over-cushioned so much that our big industries in Europe are struggling to feel the kind of global pulse of the innovation landscape. And that is an important thing to reflect on, because we cannot solve problems with the same mindset that created them. So we need to shift the mindset in the European Union. And when it comes, let's say, to e-mobility, supporting electric mobility, well, there are many innovators in this space in the European Union, also in Central and Eastern Europe. And the same way you say the European Union doesn't need to help with the business case, but it needs to kind of, in a way, get out of the way with some of the regulation. But it could be also said for the innovators. Maybe it's the member states and the sort of incumbent industry that needs to maybe make space for the innovators to actually support and scale at the speed required the development of future mobility, which is largely electric. And yes, our grids are massively outdated. That doesn't mean we shouldn't keep innovating. Why? Because, well, we know there's projections of sort of price parity on electric vehicles being reached between sort of conventional engines and electric cars next year. So it's going to change massively the sort of purchasing landscape by 2030. And I don't want European citizens to, ask, why can we not have access to the infrastructure that allows us to buy the cheapest car? Okay. Right? So it's just all these things that we need to rethink, in fact. And so I think it's a very great conversation that we're having here. You've invited me to share an example from Poland and what could be done better. So one example that speaks to me, but of course we will have a roundtable on this topic, and my colleague there is really knowledgeable on Poland. But for example, Poland is one of the largest manufacturers of heat pumps in the European Union, and at the same time there's some sort of a perception in the population that so there's not a huge appetite for installing them domestically, and so it turns out that there have been multiple programs programs in the past, or so one big program in the past that was encouraging indeed more efficient heating, but through the public communication of that program, the impression was done, so the majority of the population moved towards gas heating, right? So because that was seen as sort of reliable and solid, and so somehow that initial campaign, which of course had good objectives, resulted in a perception around heat pumps, which is now a manufactured technology, which of course would serve multiple objectives at national level, air quality being a really important one. Right? So it would benefit so many objectives, but now we're dealing with the situation of the perception created by communications on previous programs around this topic. So language matters, and we're all contributing to this perception of innovation. And we see it, so I don't know what the discussions in the Czech Republic have been lately. Perhaps over the past years you can tell me, but in our launch report for Cleantech for CEE, we have seen that actually investments in R&D in the Czech Republic dropped by 29.5% compared to 2017. And this is according to the Innovation Scoreboard. So there's something about the way we're framing the debate, the way that we're framing the debate in Central and Eastern Europe that is not actually conducive to our interest as countries that also have a great potential for being competitive, or that are innovative, and that could actually benefit from some of the technologies that we're also manufacturing, and that could give us cleaner air in the cities that we live in, and so on.
Let me try to pick up a point that Zdenek made earlier, and maybe he responds to that. What you said earlier is the system like this currently doesn't work, or at least not effectively, right? And I think if we aim for faster conversion and more impacts, then that's the point that we need to address. Because I think what Europe already starts to say, we want to move from a wave of decarbonization into a wave of more circularity, and that creates more jobs, etc. And I think what would terribly help us is to have more or less, we talked wish lists earlier, but real goals, more or less very, very regular, to sort of say these are priorities. Priorities that sectors really recognize and say that's what we're going to solve for now. And that has to become much more of a rhythm. And once that rhythm picks up, you can correct the rhythm also faster. And I think once we're on that train of journey, we can also allocate students and the next workforce that need to support that wave. I have spoken to too many decarbonization kind of providers that, for example, to do direct air capture or whatever, and say, well, I need chemical experts, I don't even find them. So there's no way of even scaling up my whatever solution, price point, whatever it is, without that supply of talent also being lined up in the same wave. So I think with that one, I'll quickly hand back to you on the system has to be able to work.
I think it's already lunchtime, so I don't want to hold you.
I think me being the organizer, I think we can have 2 more minutes too.
But you're right. I mean, what we need is really a change of way we do things at European level, not just put out a regulation based on some kind of ideas, but really be a project manager and really think along the way that you just mentioned. When we want to have more battery factories, we will need more chemical and battery engineers. And we need to be realistic. I mean, we see that China is competing on price and competing on ecology in the battery production. So there's actually no chance we will ever get to the basic raw materials production that are needed for the batteries in Europe. That will always have to be imported from somewhere. And even in battery production, we will have difficulties to compete in time that we set our goals for. So let's just be realistic in our approach, and let's just work with the numbers, not just some gist and ideas. That's it.
Thank you so much, Zdenek. And it's always difficult to have a panel before lunch. It's dangerous. I'm conscious of that. And also I'm very conscious, I said we'll have open to questions, but I'm glad we did have interaction amongst you as well. I do hope you're all staying for lunch as well. So given that this is a more closed practitioner community, I mean, feel free to also ask any questions, maybe over lunch or over coffee. And I'm really glad we did end up on more practicalities and actually some practical examples. And thanks so much, Susanna, because it was important to set the scene, but I'm glad we we are talking about like some of the potential solutions, which obviously this is for much longer discussion than 50 minutes. And also I know we have heard from 3 of you, maybe some closing remarks from you, Marta, as well, if I may kindly.
Thank you very much. My closing remark, and then this very practical hint from our side to add to my bittersweet reflection over CSRD reporting of the last year. Part of this reporting process is this double materiality process, and I think this is the best thing we can do, being the company, having like so many stakeholders around. So this is the best way and the best occasion to really go through, to do this research, to ask them, to have those dialogue sessions with your merchants, with your business partners, with your clients, with your employees, as well with your board, to assess what is the most crucial, the most important, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, what are the impacts, so you can really incorporate these outcomes into your business. Maybe it's like sounds very simple and trivial to you, all of you, because you're great experts probably in the room. But I think this is something what is really helpful when using this reporting activity, reporting exercise, to really think about, okay, so what we can do to make our business more sustainable and in a very pragmatic way. So you have to just have like 4 or maybe 5 crucial points, and in our case, of course, packaging is the number 1. Of course, air pollution and decarbonization is number 2. But there is also cybersecurity, which is super important when you're this digital platform, right? Securing data of your clients, but also your business partners. And last but not least, this social aspect, which is a gender pay gap. So this equality when you manage you have your governance of the company, you have to really be sure that you do everything to make those equal pays, for example, and equal access to many roles within the organization, to every group in your organization. So this is something that is really great to have this exercise done, and then to plan how you want to execute it in your operations, in your business strategy. And I was listening to the CEO of ING here in the bank, and I was really stunned by the great knowledge that she has, and I totally agree. This is not about just reporting for itself. It is not just ESG for itself. We need to think how we can really incorporate this into the business and make our business more competitive and more attractive, both for consumers, for our business partners, but also for employees, to attract the employees, the best talents to work for you, because you're thinking about it, right?
And thank you so much for bringing it home. And just to close and partially rephrase the entire sustainable finance agenda with CSRD and taxonomy, the whole idea wasn't to do sustainability equals reporting, but sustainability equals strategy. Now, unfortunately, it's been focused on reporting more, but exactly what you said, through that materiality assessment, for you as a company, for financial industry, it's all about identifying exactly those material risks and opportunities and focusing on them because they impact the company. I do hope now, even in Omnibus being hopeful, I hope this is where we are heading, that we are going more to the business case and strategy, maybe less KPIs and checking the boxes. Let's see. And this is a good topic to discuss over lunch, to which I invite you.
See you in Brussels.
with absolutely no delay. And it's upstairs on the first floor. You will see the sign once you get out of the room. So enjoy the lunch and get some energy for even more discussions.
Thank you.
Great work. I was watching from the room because it's on my laptop. Did you tell them where the lunch is? Upstairs? Oh, but did you mention whether it's upstairs?